Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video on the channel. Inside of today's video, we're going to be going through all 89 brawlers and giving you guys the best build for them. So with all the gadget changes, of course, you guys know the meta has shifted a lot. So a lot has changed in terms of my opinion on the best gadgets in the game. All the star powers and stuff haven't really changed too much, so let's just dive into it straight away. We won't waste any time. Also, there'll be timestamps in the description, so you can just go to the brawler that you want to take a look at, and of course, you can just pick what gadget is better. So, of course, with these changes, I think Clay Pigeons is still by far the best gadget. I know this has a 3-second, cooldown less, but it's just not as effective. It should be around like 10 seconds maybe, and then I might consider it. I think Band-Aid is the better star power now, only because with like Shelly not being the greatest brawler in the meta, she just needs that little bit more extra HP. And then I go with something like this most of the time. I mean, you play Shelly on bushy maps, right? Speed gear, so either speed gear or the gadget cooldown gear. And then with Nita, both gadgets are just pretty good. Again, this is situational because both cooldowns are pretty much the same. Nita, you run into this stun into like tanks. And then, of course, most time you want to use a shield star power, though. That is probably the better option. And then again, Heist, Hyper Bear with me any other game mode. And then in Gears, I pretty much just go speed or damage. But of course, in Heist, you can go with pet power. But yeah, you can just stick with that. With Colt, I think by far the better gadget right now is Speed Loader. But of course, Silver Bullet still is pretty good. And still with 16 seconds, you can open up the map pretty quickly. But if you're playing Heist, of course, you need Speed Loader. 11 seconds cooldown is crazy. And then with Star Powers, again, it's personal preference. I think Slick Boots is the better Star Power overall. But I like Magnum Special personally. You just have to try it out for yourself. And then with Gears, I mean, again, in Heist, I actually go with something like this just to spam out as much ammo as possible. But, Colt's all about damage, so it's either one of these two builds for sure. Next up, we have Bull. So with Bull, of course, his Stomper gadget is by far the better gadget to use. Only 14-second cooldown. Really, really good. Even in Heist, I would probably prefer Stomper. Sometimes I would like to use T-Bone Injector. I mean, it's still okay, 2k HP, but Stomper's just so good now with the rework. And then with Gears, it depends whether you're Pika or not. If you want to be Pika, you want to go for something like this. If you're just a more standard Bull player, I think something like speed and damage or health and damage, especially because Bull just gets literally bullied, so you charge up your super from taking damage, so health gear is really good for that reason. And then Tough Guy, I mean, Heist you might want to go Berserker, but I just like Tough Guy, especially because he gets bullied all the time. Next we have Brock. Absolutely, Rocket Fuel is by far the better gadget. I think sometimes you could even use this against assassins, but Rocket Fuel is just so good right now. I mean, as you can see by my build, I actually use gadget cooldown just to abuse this fact even more. But I think if you're playing like Knockout and Bounty, his better game modes, you will go for something like this. Again, a lot of people like Rocket number 4. So you can just stay with that if you're comfortable, but I just like more rockets. I hardly ever charge my 4th rocket number 4, and more rockets just means that you can actually get kills with his super. At high level, it's really hard to get kills with Brock's super because people just run out of his distance. And then we have Primo. So Primo, with all of his changes, Supplex Supplement still is the better gadget overall. Of course, there probably are some cheesy strategies where you compare Primo with a B and, break open the map. I don't think it's worth it. Just go with this. Star Powers, again, I will always vouch for Meteor Rush, especially in his better game mode Brubble, just to make more plays and everything like that. Some people like El Fuego. It's a decent amount of damage, but I just prefer this. And then with Primo, probably like speed and damage because you're going to go him on like a bushy map on sneaky fields. But you can opt for like the health gear or the supercharged gear as well. Can't really go wrong with that. Barley is next, and Barley's Herbal Tonic is by far the better gadget to use with the changes. He could just spam out heals like crazy, especially in Hot Zone and everything like that. If you're playing ladder, you probably want to opt for this more often than not because you're probably going to face a bunch of Mortis players, etc., a bunch of spam. And then Star Powers, I use medical use most of the time. Again, if you're in ranked and you got the choice, like you probably want to use extra nauseous against the tanks. Against other throwers, medical use is better. And then I use this build because, again, if you're using like medical use, you don't get value out of the damage gear, right? So you may as well just spam more of those heals with a gadget cooldown. And then with Poco, both gadgets are insane, by the way. Tuning Fork is crazy with the change. You can just spam this out like crazy. And then, of course, Protective Tune's 11-second cooldown is insane as well. People make out this gadget for the longest time is terrible, but it's so good at like countering those niche things like Ollies, Hypnotize, like lose supers, like any type of slow. Is so good. 11-second cooldown is crazy. 4-second immunity as well. Crazy. Such a strong gadget. So that's why in this meta in particular, I mean, you might not even need the gadget cooldown if you use protective tunes. Probably like speed and damage, to be honest, and just be really aggressive. Screeching Solo is the better star power as well, in my opinion, because with Poco, he lacks the damage, right? So the star power really makes up for it. And then with Rosa, of course, Grow Light is by far the better gadget. Now, before, it was easily unfriendly bushes, but Grow Light, just making everywhere Snake Prairie, is hilarious. And then I like Plant Life more than the damage star power now, because again, if you're making the whole map like Snake Prairie, you're going to get infinite heals from all of the bushes. So really, really good. And speed and damage for absolute sure. You don't need the gadget cooldown with Rosa. I'm moving on to Jessie, starting off with the gadgets. So both gadgets are pretty useful. Honestly, Recoil Spring might be, it's not a better one, but actually a bit more useful. Spark Plug still is the most useful one by far. So good for confirming kills. And then Star Powers, of course, Energize. Don't even need to think about that. Most of the time, I use like speed and damage with Jessie. But of course, if you've gone on a bushy map, Vision Gear can be pretty underrated. I mean, you can never go wrong with these two in particular. And then, of course, in Heist, you want to switch over to the Pet Power Gear for sure to get as much damage onto the safe. Next up with Dynamite. So honestly, Satchel Charge is really good, but 23 seconds. I'm starting to... Fidget Spinner isn't good. I just don't know. I've been trying out Fidget Spinner a little bit. Probably might be unpopular. Might be the better gadget. We'll have to keep trying it out. Honestly, like 23 seconds is too much. Too much. And then with the star powers, of course, Demolition is by far the better star power. And then it depends whether you prefer still Satchel Charge. It's still a really broken gadget, right? You could probably just opt for, I don't know, something like this. You definitely got to use the gadget cooldown on Dynamite, though, if you use Satchel Charge. And of course, if you like Fidget Spinner more, then you want to go with the damage gear for sure. Next, Tick. So with Tick, definitely Last Hurrah is going to be by far the better gadget overall. There are some maps where my menu can be pretty toxic, but Last Hurrah is just so good at knocking back those pesky assassins. And then, of course, Well Oiled is by far the better star power. Again, I always sometimes like this one. And then with Mythic Gear and the Shield Gear, you can never go wrong with it. Of course, on the bushier maps, I do see people tend to switch over to the Vision Gear, by the way. But, yeah, you can never go wrong with this build. Next, we've got 8-Bit. So with 8-Bit, his cheat cartridge gadget is going to be by far the better gadget. I know this has 11-second cooldown, but with extra credits, it's only good at shooting the high safe, because if anybody's moving, you're actually just locked in, aiming in a weird position a lot of time. You just never get the value that you want with extra credits. So cheat cartridge is still a better one in my opinion. Boosted Booster is by far the better star power. You only want plugged in against really tough matchups. I'm talking like Penny, Brock, and another sniper. I'd rather just use Boosted Booster. It's the reason you use him for his damage, right? And then with 8-Bit, I pretty much never swap away from this build with the health and the reload gear. You can never go wrong with it. Of course, even in Heist, I'll pretty much go this, but on a bushier map, you probably want to go with a Vision Gear instead. Next up, we got Rico. So Rico, multi-ball launcher is by far the better gadget for him still with all of his changes. Bouncy Castle doesn't even like heal you up fully most of the time. It's good on some situations, but multiple launcher is still one of the best gadgets in the game. Super Bouncy as well is the better star power overall, because you play Rico on maps with a lot of walls, right? So of course Super Bouncy is better, but Robo Retreat isn't the worst as well, and especially if you've got a tough matchup, it can be pretty good. So I would say if you're worse Rico player, you go Robo Retreat. If you're better, Super Bouncy. And then with Rico, I think you need a gadget cooldown gear so you can spam out as many of these gadgets as possible. And then I always go with Reload just to keep the pressure. That's why you play Rico, is to constantly chip them down and stop the health regen. Next up, we got Darryl. So both gadgets are absolutely poo-poo. And if I was to recommend one, again, it's game mode dependent. Tar Barrel everywhere. Heist, you can go this one. But honestly, with the gadget cooldown, you might just want to go with this so you can get your super more. One of the biggest problems with Darryl right now is getting his first super, so maybe this can help, but it's still such a bad gadget. And then star power still hoops all the time. And then I probably don't really swap away from this build, because as an assassin, it's just good to get that extra bit of HP going in. But maybe if you're more aggressive Darryl, you just want to keep going in time and time again, healthcare can be really underrated with him as well. Next up, we've got Penny. So Penny, Salty Barrel is a better gadget overall. I've been trying Trusty Spyglass out a little bit. It's not really that effective for me. And then with star powers, you want to go with Heavy Coffers pretty much all the time. You're facing off against multiple assassins, this one's going to be better. And then with Penny, I've been really liking the health gear on Penny recently. I don't know why, she's at this mid-range HP, and I don't think she benefits that much out of all the other gadgets, to be fair. So if I was to pick like two with Penny, maybe like the damage gear and health gear. I see a lot of people use pet power on Penny as well, by the way. It can be really good with the hypercharge, so it's kind of up to you. Maybe something like this is my best build in my opinion. Next up, we got Colt. So Colt, Heat Ejector is the better gadget overall probably right now, just the way that people are playing Colt. You know, Flying Hook is such a good gadget, but I think times have changed. Like the fact that when you fly in with Colt now, there's just so many brawlers with, you know, big damage potential and knockback. So I mean, it's going to be better in knockout and bounty, where Colt is really good on, and to apply pressure. But most people are using Heat Ejector and just spamming that out like crazy. Protected Pirate, by far the best star power with him. And then I do opt for something like this, just to spam as many gadgets. This is just, again, it's such a spammy meta, so I use gadget cooldown. I know people are saying it's not a good gear, but I just go it because I just want as many of those gadgets out as possible. And then hype charge is pretty decent. And then with Jacky, pneumatic booster is by far the better gadget to use. 15-second cooldown is crazy. And then counter crusher is by far the better star power. I don't know anyone that would want to use the star power. It just doesn't make sense to me. And then with the gears, I go with something like this again. You do want to spam as many gadgets as possible, so of course you want this, and then probably the damage gear. But again, if it's a bushy map where you often play Jacky, you probably would just want to go with this and not overcomplicate it. Now moving into mostly the epic brawlers here, but of course starting off with Gus. So with Gus, Cookie Bopper is going to be the better gadget still. I think this one has potential that I've fully not tested out yet, but Cookie Popper still is really good. 16 seconds isn't long enough for one of the best gadgets in the game. Star powers, of course, Spirit Animal is really, really goated. And then I just go damage and shield and don't overcomplicate it a lot of the times. You can go with like health and shield as well if needs be, if you're going to be a really passive Gus. But damage gear is really good on Gus because you combine damage gear and the extra damage you get with star power, really, really good. Next up, we got Bo. So Bo, I think the better gadget overall is Super Totem. I know Tripwire is 8 seconds, but you're not going to get your mines every 8 seconds, right? So it's kind of pointless in my sense. Super Totem's really good. You can basically always have this totem up and you're always going to get that extra charge rate with your super. I think it's really effective because you play Bo on these defensive maps. And then of course the Snare Bear, star power, by far the better one. And again, it depends on the game mode. I always go for health or vision, depending on the map. Health is really underrated on Bo. Ems is next, and I've been playing a lot more acid spray on those closed-in maps just to be a bit more toxic. I still don't think it's that great. 11-second cooldown is pretty cool. Most of the time, you need friend zoner, though, on Ems. It's by far the better gadget, though, because, again, without it, assassins are just going to destroy you. Bad Karma is a better star power. I know for months and months and months, I used to go with hype, but Bad Karma is just better. You need the extra damage with Ems, and then you want to go speed and damage with Ems all of the time. Next up with Stu, Speed Zone is going to be by far the better gadget. You can just have unlimited speed zone turrets on him. And then of course with Breakthrough is pretty good as well if you're looking to counter like throwers or Ricos, etc. But Speed Zone is going to be better. And then with Stu, you know, the world's the oyster. Pretty much everything's good on him, except for the gadget cooldown. You don't really need that. I go damage and shield because it's just better. I mean, some people go health, some people go vision, but damage and shield is just solid with him. You can never go wrong with that. Piper is next. Both gadgets are really, really good. It just depends on the situation. Piper, there's never really a better gadget. But most of the time I do use homemade recipe because of course I'm playing Piper on bounty and knockout, and then star power, snappy sniping all of the time, even on bushy maps. I don't bother with ambush. Maybe you guys might be able to get more value with it. Maybe it's a bit better now on some knockout and bounty maps. Now you can just spam unlimited homemade recipes, but I still like snappy sniping. And then with Piper, again, like most of the time you want to go damage and shield. If you're facing off against other snipers, the health gear is better. The pros use health gear against other snipers because the problem is if you get tapped up by like an Angelo or something, it takes a long time to regen and then you're losing map positioning. But if you got the health gear on, then you're pretty good, right? So that's why pros use health gear. And then with Pam, I don't know who plays Pam in this meta, but Scrap Sucker by far the best. Mama Squeeze by far the best. Mythic gear every single time. And then you want to go either one of these two gears, health or vision gear. Next with Frank, I think with Frank, I still like Irresistible Attraction, but this gadget effectively got a lot better because every single super near enough with Frank, you can't get interrupted, which is really, really good. But I still think that you missed the extra damage for Frank without this gadget. So Irresistible Attraction is the better gadget, but I won't put anyone off from using active noise cancelling as well. Star Power's Power Grab is still by far the better star power for me. That extra bit of damage, and it's not that hard to get kills with Frank because of course you're stunning people, so it's a free kill every time you hit that super. And then damage and health all the time. Of course, bushy maps you want to go with speed and damage instead. Next up we've got Bibi. So with Bibi, of course this gadget is by far the better gadget. This was actually going to be like 11-second cooldown, making it one of the best gadgets in the game, but still you can spam this out like crazy. And again, it's just dependent on what map you play. I go speed and damage on those bushy maps. I go health gear on the more open maps, and home run is the by far the better star power. And then with B Rattled Hive is by far the better gadget, probably the best gadget in the game right now. 17 seconds is crazy in cooldown. I mean, Honey Molasses has potential to be a little bit toxic in some situations, but yeah, Rattled Hive makes absolutely no sense right now in the meta. in terms of star powers, Honeycomb is the better star power, but if you're playing B literally purely for damage, then insta B load is pretty good as well. It's actually getting a bit better now, especially with the hypercharge. So you've only got that 5-second window to get that extra damage boost. So if you have insta B load, you're basically guaranteed to hit one of these, right? You surely can't miss 2 big stings in a row. And then with gears, I pretty much go this every single time with B, because you use B for the damage, or I go with this. I use a gadget cooldown. You've got it because you just spam out gadgets galore. Okay, so now moving on to Nani, starting off with the gadgets. Return to sender is going to be a better gadget pretty much everywhere, except if you're playing Nani in a weird game mode. Well, Heist, of course, this one's going to be better, maybe Brawl Ball, etc. But playing Nani on Knockout and Bounty, Return to sender is going to be a really good gadget. And then with Star Powers, again, Heist to go with this one, or like Brawl Ball or whatever. And then for Knockout Bounty, you want to go autofocus where you're playing Nani. And then with the gears, for the most part, I need to actually buy the health gear, because against other snipers, health gear is actually the better one. I always go shield gear because again in Knockout and Bounty you need that. So to me, I would rather go either health or the supercharge gear, just because you charge a super with one less shot, which can get you a lot of pressure, especially in Bounty. So I've been liking this setup with Nani. Next up we have Edgar. So Edgar is absolutely horrible right now. Both gadgets have such a long cooldown. Of course, you can play Edgar super passively, and because of how bad he is right now, maybe the hardcore gadget probably is the better option now. I don't even know, to be honest. Let's Fly, of course, gives you an automatic super straight away, but then you got to wait 23 seconds, and Edgar hardly wins any 1v1 interactions now, so maybe hardcore might be the better one with a shorter cooldown. But definitely recommend using the gadget cooldown gear, and then either shield or the supercharge gear, again, just because, especially if you use hardcore, you've got to use supercharge gear. And then maybe if you use Let's Fly, you probably want to opt for something like this instead. Next up we have Griff. So Griff Piggy Bank, absolutely the better gadget, even with a short cooldown, is absolutely horrendous. And then Star Powers, Business Resilience is going to be a better one overall, but the more tanks you face off against, Keep the Change is really, really good as well. Again, like if you're playing Hot Zone or you're just kind of playing Griff just to get pressure on the map, Business Resilience is the best ones out of all of them. And then for gears, I'd never swap away from this setup, so this is really, really good as well, especially if using Keep the Change Star Power. You definitely want to opt with the health gear with that. Next up we got Grom. So with Grom, both gadgets definitely have their use cases. Ready Check is going to be a better one overall, but if you're playing against like a Gene in Knockout and Bounty, Watchtower can be pretty good as well, great counter. And of course a bushy map like Center Stage, etc. Most of the time you just want to go Radio Check. And then I never really swap away from these two gears, because why would you want to go anything else with Grom? Next up we got Bonnie. So of course Sugar Rush, by far the better gadget. Black Powder, by far the better star power. And then this setup pretty much every single time, maybe the damage gear instead. You never want to swap away from those two. And then next we got Gale. So Gale, of course, Twister is going to be a better one overall. Don't really use Spring Ejector too much. It's maybe like a few maps where it may be good. Twister is just by far the better one. And then I use Freeze and Snow all the time, just because it takes so long to charge his super now. There's kind of no point using that one. So you may as well use the star power that slows the opponents. And then you've got the gears. Again, I never really swap away from this. You might want to opt for health gear as well with Gale. That could be pretty underrated. Next we've got Colette. So Gotcha is going to be the better one by far. Star Powers, again, I will say Mass Tax is the better one. People opt for Push It, but I'm telling you, Push It's only really good if you can just quickly throw someone into a wall, but I'd still rather just go Mass Tax, because at least then you're protected a little bit. I think with Push It, I end up dying all the time with it. I just don't really like it personally. I'd rather just have Mass Tax and just be good at aiming my Colette supers. And then with the gears, I pretty much stay with this every single time, especially in Heist. I used to use the cooldown gadget in, well, before it got reworked on Colette, but you may as well just go damage and shield now. Next we've got Belle. So Belle, of course, both gadgets are really, really good. The best one is definitely going to be Nest Egg, and then Reverse Polarity can definitely be pretty good on Knockout as well if you're a good Belle, but Nest Egg is going to be really good with that cooldown, especially in Bounty like Shooting Star. It's very toxic. Positive Feedback's going to be by far the better star power, but Grounded is underrated, guys. It really is, especially on like Hot Zone and some other situations where you can counter some aggressive brawlers. And then I probably never swap away from this setup right here. I probably need to buy the health gear as well, though. If you're facing off against other snipers, you might want to go with the health gear and the shield gear setup, but most of the time you may as well just go reload and the shield gear. You can never go wrong with that. And then you've got Ash. So Ash, I've been playing a lot more Rotten Banana, especially in tougher matchups. I don't know, for example, facing off against a Frank, then you could just keep spamming it and get unlimited rage. But I realized Chill Pill still has a pretty short cooldown. I think if Chill Pill was like 16 seconds, 17 seconds, Rotten Banana would be better. but I think Chill Pill still is the better one, definitely. Then Star Power's First Splash, absolutely. Speed and damage every single time, but if you do use Rotten Banana, then you might want to opt for something like this instead. Well, like speed and health or something like that. And then, of course, the Hypercharge is definitely worth buying. Now, moving on to Lola, starting off with the gadgets. Freeze Frame is going to be by far the better gadget option. I don't even know why Stunt Double has a longer cooldown. Honestly, it is by far the worst gadget between the two. So Freeze Flame, 11 seconds, the better gadget. You obviously got to go it. Sealed with a Kiss is by far your better star power option as well. You want to put the Lola Ego behind you, and then you can heal up a lot and heal up your teammates. Improvise might be better in Heist, or if you're facing off against multiple high HP brawlers, then it might be better, but you may as well go healing. And then I always go the Reload gear, and then depending on... depending on the map, probably Vision gear or the damage gear. Next up, we have Sam. So Sam, Magnetic Field, hard to recover. You never swap away from those. And then I pretty much just go something like this. You might want to opt for the gadget cooldown gear. I don't know. Sam's just absolutely cooked. He is getting a Hypercharge soon, but right now he's just terrible, so I don't even care about him. Next up, we have got Mandy. So Mandy's gadgets, both of them are pretty good overall. I think Cookie Crumbs is the better gadget overall because it can help you cycle through to your super if you're missing like one shot, especially if you need to get your Hypercharge super, so do recommend that. And then with Star Powers in my sights, absolutely the best one. And then damage and shield. And again, if you play a lot of knockout and bounty and you're playing off against snipers, you might want to try the health gear with her. I think it's pretty underrated for sure. Next up, we've got Maisie. So Maisie Disengage, absolutely the other gadget is terrible. If anybody is telling you this gadget is good, they're just absolutely deluded. It's definitely going to be Disengage. And then Tremors and Pinpoint Precision. Tremors is by far your better star power. I've even tried Pinpoint Precision and it just doesn't even seem to work properly. It's just really hard to get value, not worth it. Gears, of course, go for something like this. You never want to really swap away from that. Maybe you could go with the gadget cooldown sometimes, but you go Maisie for damage, right? So you may as well go with that. Next up, we've got Hank Barricade, absolutely 100% of the time. I did try Water Balloons a few times. I just couldn't really vibe with it. Barricade is better. And then, of course, it's going to blow. And this gear setup, I never swap away from, absolutely needed. Next up, we've got Pearl. So damage, gadget, absolutely. I know this gadget got buffed with a cooldown. I think it got changed or something. I can't remember. But anyways, it's just not that good. You may as well go this. I know it's only an extra 1,000 damage, but that can really help you confirm kills onto snipers in Knockout and Bounty where you play Pearl. Heat Shield, absolutely. And then Gears, I probably never ever swap away from this setup. It's just so broken on Pearl because you can just get fully healed up really quickly and heated up at the same time. Next up, we've got the Twins. So Order Fallback, absolutely. This is like the worst gadget in the game. It's terrible. And then Star Powers, I use this one every single time. And this might be better in Knockout and Bounty, but I still use Assist, especially it's really good at countering those assassins and tanks. Next we've got Angelo. So in pro play, Master Fletcher is by far the better gadget, by the way, because you can confirm kills. Like, you think about it, Angelo deals 4k damage with his main attack and then a lot more damage with his poison as well. You can one-shot so many brawlers for a wall, so it is the better gadget for pros, but you have to play Claw. So if you guys don't know, it makes you hold your attack with one finger, then click the gadget button with another, so at least the opponents can't suspect it, so you get more shots. But of course, most players probably just go for Sting and Flight because you can always get value out of it. Empower, absolutely. I've tried Flow, just don't understand it. Also Health Gear and the Shield Gear, definitely with Angelo. And then Berry, of course, Friendship is great. Even with a slow cooldown with this, it's only better in Heist. This is better everywhere else because it also charges your super when you heal people, so really good. Floor is fine everywhere. And then you want to go gadget cooldown and the shield gear with Barry. Moving on to Shade, start off with the gadgets. Long arms is by far the better gadget. This just makes no sense. It's just terrible. And star powers as well. Hardened Hoodie is by far your better star power as well. In terms of the gears, I go this every single time as well, just because you want to be able to spam out the long arms as much as possible. I mean, damage gear could be pretty good as well. Next up, we've got Meeple. So both gadgets with Meeple are very good. It just depends on the game mode, because in Brew Hockey and maybe Brawl Ball sometimes, Rage Quit can be very underrated. Well, just really strong. It can guarantee you goals in Brew Hockey. And then Mansions and Meeple is the better gadget, I would say, because you just make so many cheesy plays with it. So what I like to do a lot of the time is go for something like this. Meeple is really squishy, so you can spam out as many gadgets as possible, but it's out of like damage and shield gear for me. And then star powers, again, I think it's 50-50. Me personally, I think the better star power is rule bending, but I've been using Do Not Pass Go. a lot as well for that extra bit of damage, especially if you can get the super in a good situation. I just sometimes find that I'm ending up wasting Meeple supers, so you don't get any value if you waste this super. At least you get your reload speed back from this one. So yeah, Meeple's got a really balanced build overall. Next up, we've got Mortis. Survival shovel is still by far your better gadget. I mean, you get this one a bit more frequently, but it doesn't help charge your super, and that's the thing with Mortis. You want to charge super as much as possible, and then with Mortis you want to go the mythic gear and probably the damage or shield. Most pros actually go with damage, just because I think you get more healing when your damage gear is activated, so that can be pretty good. So yeah, I'd go with something like this. Next up, we've got Tara. So Tara, you want to go with either speed and damage, or speed and the gadget cooldown, by the way, because of the support from Beyond gadget. This is just really good for wasting the opponent's ammo, and the reason why Tara is really relevant in meta is to counter single shot brawlers with this gadget. So I actually end up just doing this and just spamming the opponents down as much as possible, and then the star power healing shade is by far your better option. Next up, we've got Jean. So with Jean, it's just game mode dependent. If you're playing gem grab, brawl ball on a more closed map, lamp blowout's better. Most of the time though, you do use vengeful spirits because you're playing Jean on like knockout or bounty, and it's going to be really good there. In terms of star powers, magic puffs is by far your better option, unless you're facing off against multiple, you know, big HP brawlers, you know, above like 8k HP for example, where you need that extra bit of damage. Then of course it's going to be better. And then most of the time you want to run either the vision gear and the mythic gear, or you want to be running on a more open map, probably just the shield gear, to be honest. And then next up, we've got Max. So with Max, phase shifter is by far your better gadget. The other one is just not needed. And then star powers, run and gun is by far your better option. Maybe in a really passive situation, supercharge is better. And then with the gears, I pretty much never swap away from this, to be honest. If you're a really aggressive Max, you might want to opt for this instead, maybe, or maybe like damage and shield. But I go with heal and shield, mainly because I'm just being passive most of the time and trying to use supers to get my teammates into the game. Next up, we've got Mr. P. So portal reinforcements is the better gadget right now. I was a bit in denial because I really like service Belle, but because you can just spam out gadgets like crazy, and these gadgets can help you charge your super and your hypercharge more fast, well, much more effectively, because it's just going to be portals everywhere. Like imagine a hypercharge Mr. P, and then these portal reinforcements, you can have like 3-4 portals up at once, so that's why it's really good. And then revolving door to give your portals that extra bit of HP. And then I use the gadget cooldown because again, I want to spam as many gadgets as possible. That's why I use Mr. P, to waste the opponent's ammo. And then I go to shield gear. You might want to opt for like, I don't think pet power is worth it personally, because you use Mr. P to waste the opponent's ammo, so they're hardly ever hitting anyone in my opinion, and plus the 25% damage extra is not really going to do too much in my opinion. Next up, we've got Sprout. So Sprout transplant is going to be by far your better gadget overall. I mean, low-key, God and Multi's got a lot better. 9-second cooldown is pretty good, but transplant, you get infinite. You're basically always going to have a super available. And then with gears, again, I use this most of the time, but maybe with the gadget changes, damage gear might be pretty good as well. And then overgrowth I use all of the time. And then with Byron, booster shots is by far your better gadget overall. Somehow it's a slower cooldown than the other one, no idea how, because all the pros use booster shots. That can help cycle your super much more effectively. And then if I really want to be spammy, I use gadget cooldown, but you can never go wrong with damage and shield with Byron. So now moving on to Squeak, starting off with his gadgets. Wind up is by far the better gadget in the game right now, because you're able to get 50% extra damage, which is really insane. You can really rack up the damage with him, like 4k plus with every single shot. You can spam this out, create so much pressure. It definitely is the better gadget, by the way. I'm using him a lot, and it's the reason why he's A tier. Residue is still a really good gadget, don't get me wrong, but you'd rather just go for this, especially if you can effectively time it well. And then in terms of star power, super sticky is the better star power overall. I won't discourage you from this one because it's always guaranteed extra damage, but I like super sticky because if you hit someone with your super, then you can just run them down, auto aim, get another super, etc. And in terms of the gears, I don't know, I've been swapping a lot with him, probably like damage and health, to be honest. Maybe you might want to opt for like something like this instead and just spam gadgets, because that's why I use Squeak, is to spam as much as possible. I know you only get it down a couple of seconds, but I do like that with Squeak. Next up, we've got Lou. So both gadgets are actually used a lot in pro play. I'd say, yeah, most pros actually use Ice Block now, because you can tank a lot with it. And pros, it's really hard to throw a super onto someone. Normally just use it for zoning. if you get what I mean. Against bad players, though, most people should just use this one because it's an insta 50% freeze. But yeah, pros have been using this for sure a lot more. Hypothermia is by far the better star power. And then in terms of gears, I just go with like damage now. Maybe even might swap for health with him because not many other ones are that effective, to be honest. I used to just go +1 to get the extra freeze. Next up, we've got Ruffs. So with Ruffs, air support is by far your better gadget. Against single shot brawlers, of course, take cover is really good, but air support is by far the better option. Air superiority as well, by far a better option. And then I go with this with him so I can spam out unlimited gadgets. Really, really toxic. Next up, we got Buzz. So Buzz, this one's going to be your better gadget overall. But X-Ray Shades is really good on those bushy maps, sneaky fields, think of some showdown maps. So both have its use cases, but this one's really good, especially paired with the hypercharge. Star powers, Tougher Torpedo is really, really good in pro play right now. But for the most part, Ice Sharp is just going to be better, so you can cycle through supers and hypercharges a lot more effectively. Fang is next. And in terms of the gadgets, Roundhouse Kick is your better gadget option overall. But because of how bad Fang is right now, I've been liking Cornthrough as well. Just for an extra bit of damage and just a little bit of zoning. And star powers, the better one for pros is Divine Souls by far. Fresh Kicks can help you make more plays, but the problem is with Fang that he's hardly ever gets kills with his super anymore. But yeah, Fresh Kicks is still a good star power. And then in terms of the gears, you never want to swap away from that. And Eva's next, and Gotta Go is by far your better option. Star powers as well, Unnatural Order is by far the better star power. If I'm facing multiple, literally all three of them are sharpshooters, I might go for Happy Surprise just to get a little bit more value. But still, Unnatural Order is better. And then I never really swap away with this with Eve. Maybe on Knockout, I might go for like this. Maybe, or like the reload and shield instead. Next up, we've got Janet. So Janet, drop the base pretty much every single time. You know, this can be pretty good as well if you're a good Janet player, but you may as well just go drop the base to stop the opponents from regenerating health. And then you pretty much play Janet on bushy maps, so you go with like speed and vision. If you don't play Janet on a bushy map, of course, you go damage and shield. So you probably need like all four of them, to be honest. And then next up, we've got Otis. So Otis fat splatter every time, ink refills every time. You know the drill. And then you normally play Otis on a bushy map, so you want to go for something like this. If it's a non-bushy map, you probably just want to go damage and the gadget gear to help you spam as much as possible. Buster is next. Slow-mo replay is by far a better option. I don't know why Utility Belt has such a high cooldown. It's not even any good. And this slow-mo replay is very, very good. And then you just go speed and damage every time with Buster and Kevlar Vest. I mean, if there's no opponents on the enemy team that have any stun, you may as well go with this. But Kevlar Vest is by far your better stop power. So now moving on to Gray with his gadgets. Walking Cane is by far your better option. You can spam this out so much in Knockout and Bounty. And then it depends on what game mode. Knockout and Bounty, Fake Injury. Everywhere else, New Perspective, especially if you're playing Hot Zone. It can be really effective. And then I pretty much never swap away from this because you want to spam as many Walking Canes as possible, but you might want to opt for like damage maybe and the gadget cooldown if you're playing like Hot Zone or something. Next up, we've got RT. So of course RT out of line, absolutely, unless you're playing some longer range like Shooting Star or something, then you may as well go Hacks instead. But out of line is really, really good. And then you want to go with health and the shield gear with RT. Willow is next, and you want to be going Spellbound pretty much all of the time. This can be pretty good to waste a lot of opponents like Utility, but Spellbound is better overall. And then in terms of star powers, I think Lover's Blind is fixed now, I'm pretty sure, so go with that star power. Someone might correct me in the comments, but Obsession is good in Brawl Ball as well. And then with the gears, I probably just damage his shield. You may as well Willow. Next up with Doug, you go extra mustard every single time because he needs that extra bit of damage, and it's really, really good. Self-service because fast food just doesn't make sense. And then of course speed and damage. Chuck is next, and rerouting is going to be your better gadget overall, just because you normally play on more open heist maps. You don't really need this, but Ghost Train can be really good on like Hot Zone maps, etc. But just go rerouting. And then Pit Stop is going to be your better option overall. And then you want to go with damage and shield or damage and health. You never can really go wrong with one of those two. Next up, we've got Charlie. So Charlie Spiders is going to be by far your better gadget option. Of course, if you're facing off against non-single shot shooting brawlers, so non-snipers, etc., then Personal Space is just going to be better. Star powers, both of them are pretty mid, to be honest. Slimy, I don't really like Slimy, to be honest. I just go with Digestive. At least it's a bit of extra damage. And then I go the gadget cooldown, and then the damage gear. With Miko, Clip and Scream is going to be your better gadget for sure. Presto did have a shorter cooldown, I think, in the sneak peeks, so that could have been better, but clipping stream is definitely better. And then again, if you're playing heist, showdown, you go with this. Everywhere else, monkey business is a really, really good star power. And then damage and shield. Next up, we've got melody. So with melody, interlude is going to be by far your better gadget overall. But there are some maps and some situations where this can be pretty underrated, you know, like parallel plays, triple dribble. There's a few instances why this is actually decent, but interlude is by far a better option. Fast beats, absolutely. And then you want to be going damage and shield with melody every time. Next up, we've got Lily. Lily, of course, vanish is going to be your better gadget. I know people will say repot is a good gadget. I mean, it might be, but I don't know, you're going to struggle to get your super with Lily most of the time. So I'd rather just go vanish. Maybe there's an alternative universe where this might be any decent. I'll have to try it out a bit more. And then you want to go gadget cooldown and the shield gear with Lily, because it takes so long to get it. You need a gadget cooldown. I'm moving on to Clancy. With the gadget change, I don't think it's really that effective to go snappy shooting anymore, even though I still really like it. Tactical retreat, you've got to go with him, because again, like once you're maximum level, you get no value out of that, but at least you're always going to have value out of tactical retreat, and it's still pretty good, and the pros used it anyways before the changes. And then star powers, I like recon personally. Pumping up, I know you get all your ammo back after every takedown, but it's actually hard to get some kills with Clancy most of the time. I don't know, it's kind of up to you. I like recon though for sure. And then gears, you can never go wrong with that. Next up, we've got Mo. So Mo, dodgy digging every single time. I don't even know why that has a slower cooldown, because it's by far the better gadget. And then in terms of star powers, on the longer range maps, you go speeding ticket because it gives you extra range. Skipping stones gives you extra DPS. You want to be going that on like hot zone, brawl ball, etc. Damage and shield, never go wrong. Next up, Juju Elementalist every single time. And then it depends on the matchup. Numbing needles if you're facing off against aggro. Guarded Gree if you're facing off against just tougher opponents, you know, for example, snipers. They're going to be able to take down this with ease, but at least a little bit of extra HP will waste that ammo. And then I just go this setup or damage gear with her. Next up, we have Ollie. So Ollie Regulate is by far your better gadget option. I will say there are some instances where All Eyes on Me is actually pretty good. For example, you know, I faced off against like a Mortis, so you're just guaranteed to get a Hypnotize with this gadget against Mortis or like Assassins. But Regulate's a little bit harder to pull off, but it is by far your better gadget because you combine it with the Renegade Star Power and you can super in gadget and get a crazy combo. 4k shield as well is really good. I just don't like this star power. I've tried it a lot and it just doesn't make sense. It just feels really weird and clunky, whilst a 4k shield is just broken. And then gears, again, bushy map, you go this. Non-bushy map, you go health gear. Health gear is really, really good on Ollie. I end up using it a lot of the time. Next up, we've got Finks. So Finks, back to the fixture, is definitely the better gadget in my opinion. This one seems cool and it can be quite effective, but I just find it quite clunky a lot of the time and end up missing it. Back to the fixture, if you can just you use your gadget after using 3 pieces of ammo, you get all of it back, so pretty good. Star powers, this one's by far your better option. Increasing your super duration by 0.25, it's really pitiful. It's just not good whatsoever. And then in terms of the gears, I go with this because you want to just spam gadgets with Finks. I don't know, Finks is a weird one. Like, you can get value out of all of his gears, right? Like health can be pretty good, but I just go gadget cooldown just because he doesn't feel the strongest, so I just want to spam his gadgets. Next up, we've got Spike. So Life Plant is by far your better option. In Heist, of course, you want to go this. Star Powers, Curveball is your better star power, but in Pro Play, Fertilizer is becoming the better star power because you end up using him on maps where Curveball is just like not that effective anyway, and you can just get hits with Fertilizer on like Sneaky Fields, for example. And of course, it's pretty squishy, so you need that. Mythic gear and the shield gear with Spike, absolutely. Next up, Crow. Slow and Toxic is your better gadget. Even with the change, I don't think it's worthwhile using defensive boosters. Some people probably try and argue with me, but it just won't work. Next up, we've got Star Powers. Extra Toxic is your better one. Outside of Heist, in Heist, Carrying Crow is your better star power. And then in terms of the gears, I go damage and shield. I mean, you can't go wrong with like the Mythic gear, maybe. You definitely need shield because it's very, very, very squishy. Maybe you can even go this as well. Speed on bushy maps. You just need the shield gear absolutely on Crow. Next, Leon. So Leon, Lollipop Drop is your better gadget overall. Clone Projector, low-key is pretty good against those snipers to waste opponents' ammo. But at the same time, Lollipop Drop is the reason why Leon is actually meta again. You pair that with maybe like the gadget cooldown sometimes. Actually, I don't think you really need that. I normally just go damage and the Mythic gear, or shield and the Mythic gear. And then Star Powers, again, it is... like, I do see an argument with Smoke Trails. I go with Smoke Trails quite a lot myself, especially on longer range maps, because you can cycle your super a lot more effectively. But A lot of instances, like in Hot Zone or in Brubble to walk the ball in, Invisi-Heal is really, really good. So again, if you're a good Leon player, you should be able to make the decision between the two. I end up using Invisi-Heal more though, personally. And then we've got Sandy. So Sandy, Sweet Dreams is by far your better gadget. This one is absolutely terrible. Rude Sands is by far your better star power. And then I go damage and speed and damage pretty much all the time with Sandy. I'm moving on to Amber, starting off with her gadgets. Dancing Flame is going to be by far your better gadget. More open maps, this can be good. But of course, Dancing Flame is really good at helping you defend yourself against assassins. In terms of star powers, I think most pros actually use this one for whatever reason. I don't know why. It's just a weird one. I just don't actually see too much value with both of them. I think Wild Flames is better though. There might be a time where you just throw your super just for pressure. So for example, in Hot Zone, you can just throw your super down one lane and then the opponents won't really want to go down there. Normally though, you just activate your super as soon as you throw it to get more damage. Next up, we've got Gears. So Gears reload gear every single time. The Mythic gear is pointless, by the way, because the way you play Amber, like I said, you throw out your super and try and ignite it straight away. So Mythic gear is pointless in that sense. So I'd rather just go like Vision on a bushier map. You know, you can't go wrong with shield gear as well with her. Next up, we've got Meg. So Toolbox can be pretty good. I think Jolting Volts is better overall though. I mean, if you're a weird Meg player, you can actually get a lot of value out of this and have infinite toolboxes on the map. So it'd be pretty good. Try it out for yourself. Heavy Metal is by far your better star power. And then Gears, I'd never swap away from this really. You might want to go for health if you're just there for pressure. But damage gear is really good with Meg. Next, we've got Surge. So with Surge, both gadgets are really effective. It depends on the matchup. Power Shield is the better one overall. But in pro play, Power Surge is better because Surge has tougher matchups now, especially since his HP nerf. So he needs this so he can get out his first level. But again, if you're at maximum level, you don't get value out of this, right? So Power Shield can be more effective. And then in terms of gears, again, I go like some like speed and damage. You normally go Surge on a bushier map so you can counter those tanks, and Surf Ice Cold is by far the better one. Next up, we have Chester. So Candy Beans is actually really underrated. 15-second spam is actually pretty good, so I really like that. Single Bella Mania, of course. And then I go just speed and damage, probably non-bushy map. I just go like probably light damage and shield with him. So something like that. Next up, we've got Cordelia. So Replanting is by far your better gadget. Showdown Poison Mushroom might be pretty good, but I still just like Replanting. So good if you combine it with your super. In terms of star powers, Combo Shrooms is your better one just because it helps you in your 1 versus 1 matchups. This can be good in Showdown, but Combo Shrooms definitely in 3 versus 3. Next up, we've got the Gears. So I pretty much never swap away from damage and shield now since the gadget changes. I mean, you might want to opt for like this instead, but I'd rather just go with the damage to help him in his 1 versus 1. Next, we've got Kit. So Cardboard Box is by far your better option. It helps you gain your super more, and especially in a tough matchup, you can sneak up and, you know, go away from the opponents as well. Hide, just do whatever you want. It's an invincibility gadget. It's really good. And then, of course, Showdown and 3 versus 3. And then I go gadget cooldown because invisibility is just imperative. You need it. Next up, we've got Draco. So Last Stand is by far a better option. I tried this. Some people said it's good. I don't think it's good whatsoever. You need this Last Stand even with a really big cooldown, and of course Shredding. And then in terms of the gears, then I reckon you do need the gadget cooldown gear with Draco now. And then probably the damage is going to be really good with him. And lastly, Kenji, of course the healing, absolutely. This star power, absolutely. And then the gears, never really want to swap away from this. So that's going to be it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.